Hey, welcome everyone. This is my weekly Freight Broker Bootcamp Live. If you're catching me on replay, hit me in the comments with hashtag replay. Love to hear from you. For the rest of you that are joining me live, thank you for being here. Today is going to be a Freight Broker Startup Live Q&A. So, Freight Broker, Freight Agent, if you're curious about how to get started, right? How to get your, one foot in front of the other, get a little bit of momentum, start making a little bit of money. That's what this is all about. So if you have questions, we're going to be doing live Q&A. Hold your questions as you come into the feed here. Let me know the city and state you're logging in from, and I will do some shout outs, right? So we'll do some quick shout outs, and then we'll jump into some Q&A, okay? So we've got Freight Hustler, welcome. From Richmond, Virginia, welcome, welcome. He's been in a lot of these lives. I don't know how many people are going to be here live today. I know it is a holiday, kind of the holiday week, right? It's post-Christmas. We're still haven't hit New Year's yet. But I'm hoping we have a good crowd. We'll do some live Q&A if you guys have some time and some good questions, and I'll do my absolute best to try to answer those questions, okay? So I try to do these every Monday at noon Eastern. I did take a little bit of time off in the fall, but I've done hundreds and hundreds of these lives. So I want to welcome everybody who's here. Tyrone from Utah, welcome. Ramon from Mexico. Ray from Mexico, nice, awesome. Flawless from Chandra from North Carolina, awesome. We got people coming in from all over the place. I love it. We got Luke from Springfield, Missouri. We got T. Landy from New Jersey. Oh, it's kind of cool. They've got this little part on the screen here where you can see who's actually commenting. That's kind of cool. Awesome. New little feature for StreamYard, which is the streaming service that I use. Because I stream this not only on LinkedIn, but on Facebook and also on YouTube. So I'm not sure where you guys are watching this, but it's available on all those different platforms. We've got Jack from Rockwell, Texas. Again, we're going to let some people get live, hold your questions, and then we're going to jump into a live Q&A. I'm going to try to cut this off a little bit earlier. I got a pretty significant to-do list I got to get through today, and I'm sure you do too. So if you do have questions, get them ready, okay? I hope you've thought of them. I hope maybe you've jotted them down, preparing for this live. But yeah, we are going to, Nathan from the Philippines. Man, we got people from Mexico and the Philippines and Texas and North Carolina and all over the place, Virginia, Utah. It's pretty cool. I love it. In my Freight Broker Bootcamp Startup online course that I launched back in 2009, I tell everybody I've trained over 10,000 students, but that's only because I stopped counting. It's closer to 20,000 now. And we've had all those students, but they've come from 16, the last I checked, 16 different countries, the US and Mexico and Canada and Colombia and Australia and the UK. And I mean, the Ukraine and all over the place, the Philippines. I mean, people from all over the place. It's really kind of amazing that we've had students all over the world. And we've been very, very fortunate. And many of our students have went on to build very successful 6 and 7 and even 8-figure freight brokerages and freight agencies. So welcome. Thank you for being here. I'm hoping that my power doesn't go out. We're in the middle of a huge windstorm. I just went outside to make sure I latched down the cover for my hot tub because I didn't want that to blow away. Not the hot tub, but the cover. I think we've got probably right now 30, 40 mile an hour winds outside. So if the power goes out, we'll see you next week. If not, I'm here for you, okay? So we got Humphrey from Dallas. We got McNeese from Pittsfield, Maine. We've got El Carice Brown from El Carice from South Carolina. We got people from all over. So, hey, listen, thank you so much for being here. Truly appreciate it. Do me a huge favor. The price of admission for being a part of this live Q&A, it doesn't require a credit card. I don't want you to pay me. It costs absolutely nothing. But here's what I do want you to do. I want you to hit the like button no matter where you're at. If you're on Facebook, if you're on LinkedIn, if you're on YouTube, wherever you're at, hit the like button. That's the price of admission. That's what gets me coming back every week is people that are engaging and enjoying the content. And so if you do that now, we're going to get started with the Q&A. If you have questions, hit me up in the comments. I'll do my absolute best to try to answer those questions. If I don't know the answer, because believe it or not, I do not know everything, I will try to point you in the right direction. Okay. I hope that works. So who's first? All right, cool. All right, so we got, how does a startup broker compete with mega brokers that have huge capacity and 10-year plus long relationships with carriers that buy below the market? Okay, cool. It's a good question. All right, so here's the thing. There are big brokers, there are medium brokers, and there are small brokers, okay? And so they all kind of have their own niche. What you're going to find typically, as a general rule, the big brokers go after big accounts. They typically want, they typically like to go after accounts that are doing 5 million plus a year in freight spend. Okay. So they typically like to go after really large accounts. They don't want to go after small accounts that are only moving 1 or 2 loads a week. I'm not saying they won't work with them, but what I am saying is they don't target them. So number one, as a startup, you should be targeting smaller accounts. You should not be going after big RFP accounts. You shouldn't be going after big Fortune 500 accounts. You shouldn't be going after Walmart and US Steel and Nestle and those big clients, okay? You really need to get your footing under you before you do that. So you want to work with some of the smaller companies that have been in business for a while, but then maybe they're only doing 5 or 10 or 20 or 50 or 100 or $200 million in sales. Now you might think $100 million in sales, that's a big company. No, it's not. In the big scheme of things, it's a small business. Actually, small businesses are considered anything that's, depending upon the definition, but a lot of small businesses are considered anything that's under $1 billion in sales, right? So I kind of look at it as if it's under $500 million in sales, it's kind of a small to medium-sized company. So that's really where you want to target. All right. So you're really not targeting the exact same. So you're not always competing directly with a lot of the large mega brokers. Okay. So on the other side of that, the advantage that you have as a small broker is that you don't have a ton of overhead. Okay. You don't have a ton of overhead. So you don't need to go out and start moving 10 loads a day in order to start making money. The reality is, if you have a handful of small clients, 5 or 10 small clients, that's all you need. And that's the recipe for you to be able to earn a 6-figure income. Now, clients vary, but I'm talking about small clients, a client that's doing maybe 1 or 2 or 3 loads a week, right? Not a big client, small clients. Okay. If you have 5 to 10 of those clients, again, the ones that typically the big brokers are not going after, you're going to be able to earn 6 figures as a broker or as an agent. So if you have a follow-up to that, let me know. I hope that gets you going in the right direction. And as far as the carriers go, here's the reality. Most carriers, most motor carriers that have their motor carrier authority, I think it's like 90+% of those carriers own less than 6 trucks. It's 80 or 90% of carriers in the country own less than 6 trucks. Okay. So, you don't have to be working with the big mega carriers trying to do all this crazy volume. You can work with smaller carriers because that's what really makes up the carrier base in the United States. There's very few trucking companies out there that own 100 or 1,000 or 5,000 trucks. There's just not many at all, believe it or not. Again, 90% of trucking companies out there own less than 6 trucks. So you're dealing with owner operators and small fleets. And those types of carriers, right? They enjoy working with smaller brokers. They enjoy working with smaller brokers because, number one, they're willing to pay a little bit more, right? Sometimes, right? Depending upon. Number two, they're able to fill in the cracks in regards to lanes that maybe some of those other carriers aren't working on, right? They're also able to, they're just usually a little bit more flexible, right? So those are a few things that kind of popped off the top of my head. I hope that helps. Hit me with a follow-up if you have anything else. All right. Anybody else who has questions, hit me up in the comments. Okay. Again, I'm going to try to limit this. So I need those questions to stack up. Don't wait on your questions. Okay. Next question is, Only follow-up I have is that the entry-level out-of-college brokers that join TQL, Chicago, go after anything and everything in the small companies you're talking about with them because they're cheap. Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, I'm not saying that every broker is only going to do business with large clients. But what I'm going to say is that their focus from a resource perspective is going after larger clients. So, again, here's the deal. And this is just kind of coming down to the brass tacks. I don't compete on price exclusively. And I don't suggest you do either. If your prospect's number one concern is price, exit stage left. Okay? Leave. Thank them and hang up the phone. Because if they're exclusively focused on price, it is going to be a miserable relationship. I promise you. You need to find shippers that are focused on value and relationships and trust and service. TQL is not known for a lot of those things. What they're known for is price, kind of like a C.H. Robinson, right? They're known for price. They've taken that C.H. Robinson model, right? And they've been very successful at it. But there's a lot of gaps in there. There are a lot of shippers, and there are tons of shippers and tons of carriers that won't touch TQL and C.H. Robinson with a 10-foot pole because they've been screwed too many times. Let me explain to you how. New broker starts working at TQL, calls up a shipper, overpromises them, promises them the world, gives them this really dirt cheap rate. And then all of a sudden, the shipper's like, well, that sounds great. I'm going to save $50 on this load. I'm going to save $100 on this load. And then guess what? They can't cover the load. The load, doesn't pick up on time. The load doesn't deliver on time. There's service issues. There's problems. And maybe they give the load back to the shipper, or maybe they come back to the shipper after and say, hey, I couldn't cover it for that. I got to bump your rate $100 or $200. How much do you think a shipper wants to hear that? They never want to hear that. So my point is this: do not focus and do not spend a lot of time with shippers that are 100% focused on price. Matter of fact, the way I filtered them out and the way that I, as a part of the sales process was very simple. I made it a rule that on the first phone call, somewhere in the first couple of minutes of that phone call, I was going to have a conversation with them about this. And I was going to say, listen, Mr. Prospect, I want to be very upfront with you. If price is your number one concern and the number one determining factor on how you pick your logistics partners, okay, I'm probably not your guy. Okay, because I'm rarely the cheapest. Now, I'm not the most expensive, but I'm rarely the cheapest. But if you'd like to understand why my customers are willing to pay me a little bit more, I'll be happy to explain. And if they stayed on the phone from that point forward, well, guess what? We didn't have a whole lot of arguing about price. Yeah, we still had a little bit of negotiating, but they never expected me to be the cheapest. Does that make sense? All right. I hope that helps. I hope that helps your follow-up. Awesome. Thank you so much. Good. Signing up for Accelerator, big help. Okay, awesome. Thank you for the kind words. I really, really appreciate it, Freight Hustler. What do we got here? We got Jack. When you were building your brokerage, did you focus on building agents, recruiting agents, or both? What was your strategy for each, if you don't mind sharing? Organic growth these past 3 years has felt extremely challenging. Great question, Jack. So here's how it worked. I launched the brokerage late in 2003, early in 2004. When I started my brokerage, I was the chief cook and bottle washer. I was doing it all, right? I was doing sales calls. I was doing operations. I was hiring. I was doing billing. I was doing collections. I was doing it all. Okay. And then we started filling in the cracks and building a small inside team. Okay. Of which I was involved in all of it, every element of the business: hiring, training, selling, moving loads, all of it. And then what happened was I realized that my primary value, the biggest value that I could provide at that point in the business was sales and hiring, right? So that's when I started focusing on those two areas and I started hiring into the others. So I had operations people. So I knew that we were going to migrate to an agent business model, but I also knew we needed to build our systems. We needed to build our brand. We needed to build our credit. We needed to build the infrastructure of which an agent needs to thrive. So for the first 3 years, all I did was build it from an inside brokerage perspective. First year we did $1 million, then we did $3 million, then we did $6 million. By that point, I felt comfortable that we had good credit, we had good systems, we were ready to go. So I launched the agent program. At the point that I launched the agent program, I started divesting myself of clients and giving them to our inside salespeople and operations people, and started moving away a little bit from the client side, the day-to-day clients. I was still involved in the sales side of it in a lot of perspectives, but I wasn't involved in the day-to-day operations of moving loads, right? And quoting everything, right? So at that point, I started heavily working on the agent program, right? So I was probably spending more than 50% of my time on the agent program. And a lot of that had to do with selling there, which was recruiting, because recruiting is still selling, right? So you're just selling a different target, right? So if you've got to recruit agents, you're selling agents. If you got to get shippers, you're selling to shippers. But either way, it's selling, right? So that's when I started focusing on recruiting agents and building systems and a product around that. From there, we just continued to grow. We went 12 million, 18 million, 20 something, 30 something, 40 something, 50 something, 80 something, right? So, and then that's the platform that the company has grown upon. And now the company does close to $500 million in sales, right? So ultimately, that's kind of where I went. But I want to get back to your question really quick. Recruiting or both was the strategy? Yeah, so that's the path that I took. So if you're running an agent-based business model and that's your focal point, you really need to focus on driving, to growing that agent program and supporting that agent program for growth. Now, you can still be involved in sales from the perspective of supporting your agents. Okay. So what do I mean by that? Let's say, for example, you have an agent that has a really good prospect and, they're looking for some additional trust, or they're looking for some additional support, or they're looking for some, they just want to feel good about their decision, right? You can offer to provide a role and be a part of that, where you as the CEO or the president or the owner, you want to come in, give them the, verbal, nod and let them know that not only is this agent saying this, but the company and the owner behind it is supporting that. You could do some face-to-face visits. But ultimately my point is you can help support the agents from a sales perspective, right? Because that's really where your growth is going to be, if that's your model, your agent model. It's very hard to serve two masters where you're going out and getting your own shippers and you're also going out and having an agent model. In a lot of ways, you're kind of competing with your agents if you have your own inside model. Some people do it, some people don't. I found it to be a little bit of a struggle. Eventually, I divested and spun all of my inside operations people who had a book of business off into independent agents of their own. And then we didn't have any of our own direct clients. We just had agents that we supported. So I hope that kind of draws a picture. If you have a follow-up, let me know. Okay, Tyrone Townsend asks, how do I start as a freight agent? Great question. If you don't have a lot of experience, if you don't have a lot of capital, what I strongly suggest is starting as a freight agent. I tell everybody, you can get started as a freight broker for thousands of dollars. You can get started as a freight agent for hundreds of dollars. First thing you should do, depending upon your background, is you probably should get trained on the basics and the fundamentals of what an agent does. That's why I put together Freight Broker Bootcamp. If you guys are curious about that, again, we've trained over 10,000 students and we offer a 60-day, 100% unconditional money back guarantee. It's an online, go at your own pace course that teaches the step-by-step what you need to understand in order to make money as a broker or as an agent. Okay. So that would be number one. You got to train. Number two, you're going to find a brokerage that you're going to work with, that you're going to work under as an independent contractor. You are going to be a 1099 independent contracting freight agent. So you're going to own your own business. Okay. You're going to work from home. You're not going to have to report 9 to 5. You're not going to have to, check in and check out and punch in and punch out, and ask when you can take breaks and do all that. You are your own business owner. They cannot control you because you are an independent contractor. You're not a W-2 employee. At that point, you're going to get paid on the profit that you generate. So if you have a shipper and you move a load for them and they make, there's $200 in profit, say you paid the shipper is going to pay you $1,000, the carrier you paid $800, there's $200 margin there. You're going to get paid somewhere between 50 and 70% of that, which is $100 to $140 on that one individual load. So you can see when you start moving one of those a day or 2 of those a day or 10 of those a week, it adds up really quick. Okay. So, from there, you're probably going to want to identify a niche. You're going to want to niche down a little bit. So get trained, find a broker, find a niche, right? And then you got to get out and you got to start hustling on the sales side because it's a very sales intensive business. You're not going to hang a shingle or put a post on social media and say, hey, I'm a freight agent, and people are going to start knocking on your door. That's not going to happen. Okay. It's going to take some time for you to build up a sales pipeline. Start doing outreach by a phone and by email and by LinkedIn. Again, that's the big part of what I teach in my Freight Broker Sales Accelerator program. Okay. Now's a good time to kind of share that with you guys because I know you guys are going to ask. But my Freight Broker Sales Accelerator program is an 8-week live coaching program where I take that piece of my brain, I transplant it into your head, and I teach you my best freight broker sales strategies, tactics, tools, but most importantly, my entire sales system that allowed me to do over $200 million as a broker. Okay. So I put over 1,000 clients through that program over the last several years. We got great reviews. I think the reviews are about a 9.2 out of 10 ranking after people have completed the program. So we got a lot of great reviews. It's a very popular program. It's currently not open for enrollment, but I probably will be opening it up for enrollment maybe in January or February. So if you get on that wait list, freightbrokerbootcamp.com/waitlist, you'll get notified when spots open up. Okay. So I hope that helps. Good question. Where are we at? Chat. Boom. Okay. Let me get back here. Wow. A lot of questions today. Okay, I need your suggestion. I'm new freight broker and I want to start with a drayage freight broker. Okay, what's your question? I'm not sure what your question is. Be more specific. What is your question? Oh, here's the second part. My brother-in-law has been working as a freight forwarder in the last 10 years from India, and I'm located in Atlanta, USA. I want to know how to start here in the US as a freight broker. Okay, so you want to focus on drayage. Well, if you are going to be a broker that focuses on the drayage niche, just so everybody understands what drayage is the trucking component of a multimodal movement. So for example, importing product from China. Well, it goes from the manufacturing facility to the port on a truck in China. And then it goes from the port to our port, let's say Long Beach, right, in California. And then that container gets offloaded and gets put on a truck. And then that container goes to another location, directly to a shipper or to some sort of a warehouse or whatever. Okay. So that trucking component is drayage. Same thing goes for rail. Same thing goes for air. Okay. So drayage can be either air, rail, or ocean. Okay. And it's the trucking component that goes from the origin to the port or from the destination to the, from the destination port to the final location. Okay. So that's what drayage is. So what you're going to do as a broker, you are going to probably, it's hard to identify. Let me just take a step back so I'm clear. When companies, manufacturers, shippers import goods from China, they typically hire an international freight forwarder. That international freight forwarder is licensed to move freight internationally, okay? And moves, can handle not only the drayage component on one end, but also has the contracts with an ocean liner and ocean, container vessels. And then it has the drayage on the other end. So then what'll happen is a shipper will say, hey, I need to move a container from China to Long Beach. They'll give them an all-in rate from origin to final destination, and it's all included, right? So it's very hard for you as a freight broker to compete on that. You're focused more on domestic transportation, okay? That's your niche. And so what you can do is you can work directly with freight forwarders as your clients, and they can outsource the drayage component, whether that be inbound or outbound drayage component, from the port to the final destination or from the origin to the port, right? So they can hire you as a broker to help support them on the truck drayage component of their overall movement. So let's say they quoted, just for easy math, $10,000 to move a container from here to here, and drayage on the US side, they budgeted $1,000 for it or $2,000 for it, right? So now they'll hire you to handle that drayage component. They'll pay you whatever the rate you guys agree to, and then you'll manage the truck side of that drayage component. So your focal point, what most brokers do is they work with international freight forwarders, because it's going to be very hard for you to break in to those big shippers. And even if you do, the problem is that they're already working with an international freight forwarder that's giving them an all-in rate, okay? And they like that all-in rate on one invoice coming from one vendor, right? Makes it very easy for them. So they don't want to hire, the shipper doesn't want to hire somebody on the drayage on one side and the kid separate on the ocean vessel and then a drayage on the other side. They don't want to do that because it's very time consuming, right? And it's unnecessary, right? So that's why they'll hire an international freight forwarder. That's why you will target those freight forwarders. I hope that helps. And I hope that makes sense to everybody who's kind of new to the game here. But drayage is a good niche, but it's slightly different in who you're going to be targeting as customers. Okay, what's a good way to calculate lane quotes? Okay, so here's the thing. Technology continues to get better, but technology, even AI, is not to the point where you can just put Buffalo, New York to Atlanta, Georgia for a flatbed load, and it's going to give you a perfect rate. It's going to give you the exact rate because that data is going to lag a little bit. Number one, it's not real time, okay? So you can use those tools as a baseline, as a starting point for your rating, to understand your rating research. So the DAT, Truck Stop, and all these other rating tools, you can use that as a baseline for a starting point. It's going to give you a range, and those tools are good for that. But the best way to understand spot market freight brokerage trucking rates is to have a conversation with a carrier that regularly moves that lane or has his truck posted wanting to move that lane. So you go to the tools, get the basic range, and then from there, you're going to either post a load, or you're going to call on trucks that are posted in that lane, or you're going to look at a lane history from the load board that's going to tell you, hey, this carrier has posted their truck every day, 30 trucks in the last 30 days running this lane from Buffalo to Atlanta. Obviously, you're going to want to call that carrier. You're going to use that foundation of the rating tools that the rates that you found, the range from those rating tools, and you're going to call them and you're going to negotiate. The last thing you're going to do, what you're not going to do, is you're not going to call them up and say, hey, how much do you want for Buffalo to Atlanta? They're always going to tell you $3, okay? Because they'd love $3, but they know they're not going to get paid $3 a mile. So what you need to do is you need to take the bottom level, the bottom of that range, go a little bit lower, and then that's your starting point for negotiating. You say, hey, listen, it's Buffalo to Atlanta, one pick, one drop flatbed load. It's 900, whatever, 800 and some miles. We pay X. And then from there, the more if they hang up on you, well, then you might be too low. If they negotiate with you, at least you have a starting point. You find 3 or 4 or 5 carriers that have that baseline that you get that data from, and then you kind of figure out what's realistically going to cost you to cover that truck on any given day. The rates are typically not going to fluctuate hundreds of dollars in a day, but they can fluctuate 10, 20, 30, 50 sometimes, depending upon capacity, depending upon fuel, depending upon weather, all kinds of variables. So that's kind of a baseline starting point for you. The cool part is once you understand what the rate is from Buffalo to Atlanta, you're going to have some history there. You're going to know what the rates are, and you're going to know some of the carriers that you can call. And then you use that as a part of your knowledge base and as a part of your business systems to quote those lanes, anything like that going forward, and to quote to your shippers and to make sure that you know who to call to cover those lanes. And then you just continue to build that knowledge base, right? You build that data, you build that system. And so I hope that helps. I hope that makes sense. If that made sense, make sure you hit the like button, okay? If you have a follow-up to that, make sure you hit me up in the comments. Okay, how do you prevent a client from running up a bill on you and then not paying net 30 comes around? Okay, so the way you prevent that is by running credit on the shipper in advance and not doing business with startups. So if you have my rule was this: if they had not been in business for 2 years, I wasn't giving them credit. They had to prepay. Okay. And even if they had been in business for 2 years, I'd start their credit line out very small and then we could build it up. You only want to work with shippers who have good credit. If they don't have good credit, they have to be prepay, because you can't afford to run a load, a $3,000 load for a shipper, pay a carrier $2,500 or $2,700, because if the shipper doesn't pay you, you still owe the carrier. Okay. It doesn't matter when the shipper pays you, you got to pay the carrier on time. So you have to make sure you only do business with companies who have good credit. So number one, you have to evaluate their credit up front. Number two, you have to monitor their credit occasionally. So my suggestion is at least once a year, preferably at least every 6 months, you run a credit check on your existing customers that are moving freight with you. So if they're actively moving freight with you, you run credit on them. If somebody hasn't run a load with you for 6 months or 12 months, then they start back up, then you need to run credit on them again before you start running with them, right? Because credit can change, and you're going to see how are they paying their other vendors. If their credit score is trending down and their days to pay is going up, then you're probably going to want to be cautious. If their credit is solid and isn't changing or is getting better, well, then obviously you know that's a good risk. There's always risk, okay? So that's going to give you an idea. Then beyond that, if you really want to get advanced and if you get some capital and you start running a lot of freight with some big shippers, you can always get receivables insurance, meaning you can insure your receivables, where what happens is if a shipper doesn't pay you, the insurance company will actually compensate you for that. Now, there's a lot of conditions in there, and there's a lot of variables, and there's deductibles. But the point is you can insure your receivables. So let's say you have $100,000 in receivables with this one shipper, meaning money that they owe you, invoices outstanding, and then all of a sudden they go bankrupt. You might have a $10,000 deductible on that, but the insurance company is likely to cover the other $90,000. Okay, so receivables insurance is also a tool. It's not something that a lot of startups do. It's usually after you get a little bit more established, and you typically only use that on larger shippers, but that'll give you a little bit of a baseline. Hope that helps. We've invested in Sales Dash, Broker Pro, Triumph Pay, Load Pay, Verify, Highway, LinkedIn, LB Rates, DAT1, DAT-IQ. Okay, about to pull the trigger on Load Track, Tool, Macro Point, or Load Track. Thoughts? I think that you've got a lot of technology that you're paying for, so you need to get some shippers to pay for that technology. So you need to start making some money, okay? I don't know how long you've been operational. You may be making a ton of money. I don't know. My point is you got a lot of technology there. You got a lot of great tools there, right? But a tool is only as good as the hand that wields it, right? It's like a hammer. A hammer is useless just sitting on this table. A hammer is useless just sitting in a toolbox. But when I pick it up and I use it, now it has function. Now it has purpose. Now it has value. So these tools are all great, but they're only as good as you leverage and use them to achieve your ultimate goal, right? So I hope that helps. What was your most successful client acquisition strategy? Cold calling, cold visit, email. I would say the two that we had the most success with would be cold calling and LinkedIn, using LinkedIn as a social selling tool. Those are probably the two that we had the most success with. If you looked at the big scheme of the revenue that we generated and the new clients we got, it would probably be those two. And I still think today, those are probably two of the top. Now, I'm not a big guy on cold email, although it can work and it does play a role. I love face-to-face visits. I love going out and pressing the flesh. The challenge is that unless your niche is specifically in your geography, or you're only going to limit your niche to your specific geography, you're going to have a limited number of contacts and shippers that you can work with, right? Here in Buffalo, manufacturing is not a big, right? It's not a big industry, right? It's a dying industry. So I realized that. So I wanted to be able to expand into other markets. So when we first started, we did a lot in the Northeast. We did a lot up in Mass and Connecticut and New Hampshire and all the way down through New Jersey and Pennsylvania and New York. So that Northeast corridor. So I couldn't go and visit everybody. It just didn't make sense, right? To go visit everybody because it just wasn't effective. So we used the phone and LinkedIn as a tool to try to compensate for that with numbers, right? So I hope that helps. Jack, thank you for the feedback. My approach essentially, I was wondering what was your recruiting strategy was. Did you go to networking events, use LinkedIn? I don't like to poach. However, if someone's unhappy. Yeah. We mainly used LinkedIn for recruiting. LinkedIn became a major tool for us. Okay. Early on, when we first launched the agent program, we weren't using LinkedIn. We were doing job ads and we were, building relationships with people that were already existing agents or brokers through networking or through cold calling, right? We were doing those sorts of things when we were recruiting agents. We also started doing marketing. We started doing YouTube videos. We started building a blog. We started doing SEO to get inbound. So we were doing a lot of things. And then when LinkedIn really kicked in, I think I joined LinkedIn, I think in 2008, maybe 2007, 2008. And then once I realized the power of LinkedIn, we started using LinkedIn as a primary source for recruiting agents and getting shippers. So hope that helps. Yeah. Which tool do you recommend for compliance, whether truck is good or not? Kindly help me which tool. Yeah, I can't tell you which tool to use. There are tons of tools out there, right? You've got really high-end expensive tools, and then you got more affordable tools. You got things like Highway, which is really expensive, right? You've got things like Carrier 411, which isn't nearly as expensive. You got Freight Validate. You've got all these different tools. There are a ton of those tools out there. I can't tell you which tool to use, okay? Because I don't understand what your exact need is and what your exact financial resources are, right? So what I can tell you is leverage the tools that you can afford in order to protect yourself from a compliance perspective. You want to make sure that they have an active authority. You want to make sure they have proper insurance. You want to make sure the driver has, a legal CDL, right? You want to make sure that the person you're talking to is actually a part of the company and that they're not trying to, impersonate somebody or steal their identity. So there's some few basic check marks that you need to follow. I'm thinking about putting together a video for that. The problem is that it changes fairly, it's changed fairly rapidly, especially the technology part over the last couple of years. So I'll probably put a training together on that in the near future. So I hope that helps. TJ, I already answered this question earlier, so you can go back on the replay if you didn't hear it. What questions should I be asking shippers in order to quote them the best rate for their lane? Okay, well, you need to understand what the lane is. You need to understand what type of equipment they use, right? Or that they need or require or want. You need to understand, is it appointment only, right? Meaning there's going to be appointment on the pickup and delivery. You need to understand, is it first come, first serve, right? Which means, they just show up to the shipper, the pickup location. And if there's a big line, then they've got to wait. If there's no line, then they get loaded, right? You got to understand, is there lumpers on the pick or delivery, right? Which is loading and unload costs. You got to understand, is there any specialty nuances? Like if it's refrigerated, what is the temperature that it needs to move at? If it's flatbed, does it need tarps? So these are some of the things that you're going to need to understand, right? In order to best quote it. You understand what is their timeline, right? Is this an expedited load where it needs to be there and you need a team driver? Or is this something where you really, it just needs to be there in the next couple of days, right? Where there's a lot of flexibility. You understand, does the pickup and delivery locations have a dock? Does it require a forklift? Does it require, some special equipment to load or unload? Is it going to a job site? I mean, there are questions that you're going to need to understand that are specific to your niche. Some of those questions were specific to flatbed. Some of those questions were specific to refrigerated. Some of those questions are specific to van load. So I can't give you just a couple of questions because the questions will vary based on different equipment. So I hope a few of those helped. What's the best way to handle international freight? The best way as a startup broker to handle international freight is not to handle international freight if you want to make money. If you're a true startup, don't focus on international freight unless you're just focused on the drayage component. You're not going to be able to compete with international freight forwarders on trying to move a load from Jacksonville to where another country, right? To Italy or to the UK, right? Or to wherever. You're not going to be able to compete with an international freight forwarder on that. I always looked at the international component of freight brokerage as an add-on if you had existing clients doing domestic, and then they had a little bit of a need in the international side where they needed some help. And at that point, what you would do is you would partner with an international freight forwarder. You would use them as your carrier. You would get all the specifics of that from that shipper, and then you would give them to the international freight forwarder. They would then quote you a door-to-door rate, and then you mark up that door-to-door rate. You sell it to your shipper, and then if they give you the load, then you use that international freight forwarder as the party that will actually do all of the work for you. You are going to do nothing in that movement, okay? Because it's just like they're a trucking company picking up from point A to point B, but they're an international freight forwarder handling the entire movement. So I hope that helps. Okay, maybe another question or so, and then I'm going to wrap up for today. Let me see if I can find a question that I haven't answered yet. Give me 1 second. I'm trying to find a good question that I haven't answered. Here's a question that everybody needs that'll be an important one. I've tried to work under some brokers and they automatically say they won't work with me because I don't have a book of business. Several big brokers have told me this, and I'm wondering who to approach to start. Well, stop approaching big brokers who don't need you. Okay? I'm just being totally upfront with you. Big brokers, well-established agent programs don't need you. They have a product that can attract brokers and agents who have a book of business. That is their market. So you want to focus on smaller brokers that are doing $1 million, $3 million, $5 million, $10 million in sales, that are looking to scale, but don't have the financial resources or the guts to go out and hire somebody for $80,000 salary plus benefits plus commission, but would be happy to hire somebody who wants to aggressively go out and get customers, and they only have to pay them straight commission when they generate profit. So you want to focus on smaller brokers, even if they're not marketing an agent program. If they have an agent program, great. If they don't have an agent program, still talk to them, right? Develop a relationship with them, tell them a little bit about what your plan is, and offer them that risk-free proposal. If you talk to 50 companies that match that criteria, small brokers, $1 million to $10 million in sales, okay, and you can't sell yourself into a straight commission, zero risk proposal, you're going to fail as a freight broker anyway. You're going to fail as a freight agent anyway, because I've never had anybody who's done that's actually failed. Now, does it take a little bit of work? Yeah. But you're talking about a little bit of work to potentially build a multi-million-dollar business. Is it worth it? Absolutely. And I'm not coming down on you, Nathan, as much as I get this question all the time, and everybody's the Debbie Downer. Oh, nobody will hire new agents unless you have a book of business. Bullshit. You're talking to the wrong people. Okay? Talk to the right people. Sell yourself. Offer a risk-free proposal, and you're going to get an opportunity. Now, at that point, now you got to do the work. Okay? Hope that helps. All right, that's going to wrap it up for today. Listen, guys, I really appreciate you guys being here. If this was all about startups, so what I want to share with you guys is this. If you need help or you're interested in learning more about how to become a freight broker or a freight agent, you can go to freightbrokerbootcamp.com. All the details are there. I had that program since 2009. I put over 10,000 students through that program. We offer a 60-day, 100% unconditional money-back guarantee. We're well known to be the most cost-effective and comprehensive online freight broker, freight agent training program. If you sign up, you'll get instant access to the entire training program. We don't hold anything back. And then at that point, if for any reason you're not happy in the first 60 days, for any reason, just email us and we'll refund your money. Okay? I can't make it any easier than that, right? I've taken all the risk out of it for you, right? And you can get started for like $185 one-time investment. So check it out at freightbrokerbootcamp.com. If you guys are more interested in the sales side, say you're already a broker, you're already an agent, you're ready to get selling, okay? But you need some help on the sales side, get on the wait list of my Freight Broker Sales Accelerator, which is freightbrokerbootcamp.com/waitlist. If you get on the wait list, you'll get notified when we open up spots for this next cohort, right? It's a small group program where I personally coach and mentor people like yourself, and I teach them my entire system. We've had many of those students go on to build multi-million-dollar businesses. We've had a lot of great feedback from students. They love the program. So if you get on the wait list, it's no obligation on the wait list. It's not a free program. It's not a cheap program, but you will learn the skills and the systems that you need to predictably get new clients, 2, 3, 4 new clients every month. So I hope that helps. Have an awesome day. Have an awesome week. Hit the like button no matter where you're at. Truly appreciate you guys being here. Have an awesome day. Have an awesome week. We'll see you next week on the next Freight Broker Bootcamp Live. Thanks all.